You suck at practicing, but I can teach you how to practice the right way. Stay tuned to find out how. Hey everybody, it's Spencer from Start Manga, and welcome to my new series, How to Learn. In this series, I'm going to teach you all the necessary steps to becoming a master of learning to draw. This series is going to cover how to practice, different routines, the necessary things to learn, and much, much more, so watch out for more videos. Today on How to Learn, we're going to talk about the key ingredients to practicing the right way. If you've been hitting a plateau with your art, you can't seem to figure out why you're struggling to get better when you just started, or maybe you just want to learn faster and smarter than everybody else, you're in the right place. Now you can take it from me, I've been practicing since I was a kid, but the process was very on and off, with practice happening a few times a week at best. My practice routine was unfocused and mainly involved me sketching random things or copying other people's drawings. I still learned a lot as a beginner, but if I were to do things now, there's a lot that I would change. Namely, there's a very easy, intuitive way to practice that will elevate how fast you learn to draw. What I realized is that something special is needed to grow as fast as possible. The 3 sacred practice principles: effectiveness, consistency, and deliberateness. Today, I'll show you how to implement those so you can master practicing. Real quick before the video starts, if you're new to this channel, please make sure to subscribe so you can get all of the latest updates on my videos. Also make sure to leave a like on this video and comment if this helped you. It really helps out the channel. With all that said, let's get into the video. Drawing has a difficult learning curve to it. Even if you've just started drawing, I'm sure you've realized how challenging it is to go from knowing nothing to even drawing a simple face. At first, the basics aren't too hard to grasp. You learn to draw basic shapes, how objects look in 3 dimensions, maybe some perspective drawing, other things. However, the nature of drawing is to recreate the world on paper, and beyond that, to create things the world has never known through your imagination. As a result, the building blocks can only get you so far before you have to start tediously practicing skills over and over and over and over and over and over. For example, to draw the body, you have to learn how it works, its proportions, where the muscles insert, how it moves in space, and so much more, to the point where true mastery of the figure takes years to decades for most people. On top of that, you need the skills to not just know about the body, but how to make it look aesthetically pleasing when you draw it. What I'm saying is that it's hard. And that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to these things. Practicing correctly makes your learning curve more efficient. Proper practice can be the difference between walking up a waterfall, for example, to walking up a ladder, and you can see which one of those would be a little bit easier. The purpose of this is to make the learning process faster, so you can get a lot of drawing done without spending 12 hours a day on it. We do that by practicing effectively, consistently, and deliberately. Effective practice makes your sessions efficient and easy. Consistent practice makes it easier to build up skills over time and maintain that knowledge. And deliberate practice gives you a target to aim for, so you know what your next steps are. I'm sure you're curious by now, so let's talk about what these principles are. We're going to start with the effectiveness principle. Practicing effectively just means that before you start a session, you know what that session is about, and you preferably have a schedule ready. When we have a schedule in place, our work becomes easier because we don't have to think about each step. Think about walking up literal stairs, step by step. When you're not effective with your practice, you're essentially walking up the stairs with a bunch of plates in your hands, looking at every step, and possibly crashing down when things get too hard. When you're effective with your practice, those plates are gone, and you're just walking up the stairs hands-free. You never have to look at the steps because you know exactly where to place your foot next. So, to effectively practice, we need to plan ahead for the sessions we set. This can mean making a playlist of YouTube tutorials to watch, making a mark in your sketchbook of where to continue from, making a to-do list of what you want to complete in the session. Effectiveness is easily tailorable to you and your needs when practicing. Consistency is our next principle. To practice consistently is as straightforward as it sounds. You have to practice multiple times a week, every week. However, this doesn't mean that you have to practice 6 hours a day every day. 10 minutes daily, or even just a few times a week can be sufficient for drawing if that's what you need. What's more important is to practice at the same times on the same days. This habit builds connections in your brain that over time will let you know that around a certain time on a certain day, it's drawing practice time. Consistent practice has another important function. It makes the jump from one session to the next much, much easier. If you practice once a week, it's probably challenging to just pick up where you left off because some of that knowledge has slipped your mind and requires review. Now, I want to share a personal story about why consistency is so important to me. When I was a beginner, just learning how to draw, I would usually practice when I felt like it, specifically when I felt inspired. This led to me drawing a few times a month on average, on random days, at random times, completely unscheduled and unprepared to learn. The result was me looking up a tutorial on YouTube, learning how to draw something, practicing it a few times, hating how bad I was at it, and then going back to drawing little anime heads because I felt like I had the most success with those. And there laid the key to all my issues. I was clearly getting better at the thing I consistently worked on, heads. In comparison, no matter how many tutorials I watched on other subjects, nothing seemed to stick. I'm sure most of you can relate to how that feels. You watch a tutorial and then a few weeks later you have no idea how to draw that thing anymore. And even though I was consistently practicing those heads whenever I felt like other things were going wrong, I was still only getting better at a very, very slow rate. Because I knew that if I looked up a tutorial on how to draw heads better, I would have to submit to the harsh reality of learning, where I'd have to admit that I didn't actually know as much as I thought I did. The thing that changed my approach was when I finally decided to bite the bullet and look up a head drawing tutorial. Keep in mind, this was after years of heads and faces being my default relax and recuperate drawing style. I remember distinctly that I watched a tutorial by Cynics Design on head drawing because I kept having trouble drawing heads from imagination. The tutorial took a while to get through, and I took some pretty decent notes on the subject. This is when the magic really came through. From watching one tutorial and really attempting to understand the concept and improve upon what I didn't know, I instantly went from drawing heads like this to drawing heads like this. Now, you might be thinking, well, where's the consistency? You watched one video, that's not really consistent. I'm getting to that part, don't worry. When I finished the video, I very luckily was inspired for longer than just a day. The initial success felt like when I first started drawing. Every day I would come back to my sketchbook after school and draw heads, and every day I would get just a little bit better, much faster than my initial rate when I would just go into relaxation mode. Sometimes I would watch more tutorials, sometimes I would just draw for hours, and in total, I spent about a week in this zone of just wanting to draw heads. All the while, I was unknowingly ingraining this knowledge into my memory, creating a repertoire of head drawings. Even though that initial burst lasted a single week, two key things came out of it. Number one, I didn't stop at 1 week just because the inspiration wore out. I kept drawing because it felt like once I got home, I was supposed to draw. Like something was telling me that because my sketchbooks were right there on the table, I had to practice. And two, to this day, I still maintain the head drawing knowledge from that specific week. Results like this are why it's important to practice in small portions over time instead of cramming a ton of learning into a single day. You can see that in test results if you've ever procrastinated at school, which I know you have, don't lie to me. If you're good at last-minute studying, you can get some A's and B's just by waiting until the last day and then doing all of the work in one night. But you'll usually forget that information within a few days, whereas if you take your time and study a bit every day for a week before the test, you are much more likely to ace it, and you'll remember that information for much longer, pretty much forever, if you use it as consistently as you would use your drawing. This is obviously much easier said than done, but through a bit of discipline, it's not too hard to practice consistently. And with consistency, you'll see compounded abilities that you never thought you'd have so soon into your drawing career. Now, consistent practice is important, and so is effective practice, but if that practice is not deliberate, you won't improve nearly as fast as you could. Deliberate means that you have an intention. There is something that you want to improve, and you are focusing on improving it. This may seem obvious, but it's very easy to avoid the stuff that we're not good at, despite how effective it would be to learn them. For example, most people find hands to be one of the hardest things to draw. They're incredibly complex with a lot of moving parts. So, a lot of artists avoid drawing them or draw the same hand poses in every single piece that they make. This happens not only in artworks, but in the practice sessions, where we draw things we know we're good at so that we don't feel bad about the result. I myself have done this many times in practice. I love drawing faces, as you've heard before, and I've gotten a lot better at drawing faces over the years. I'm not a master, of course, and there is a lot of room for improvement with my heads and my face drawings, but I'm much worse at drawing hands. It would follow that I should be practicing my hands, but I absolutely hate doing it because they just look awful. This is something you're probably doing right now without even realizing it. So take a second to think about whether what you're practicing is actually something you need to work on. The best artists spend days, weeks, even months of their life working on the things they hated drawing most. Because that suffering of watching yourself fail to draw a hand or anything else over and over is what takes your abilities to the next level once you figure it out. Now for the meat of it. What is the best way to practice? Well, it's pretty simple actually. In fact, I've more or less already told you how, but here I'll really go into detail on applying this routine. All you need to do is pick a subject, learn the subject, and practice the subject. Like I said, it's really simple. It's probably exactly how you'd think you're supposed to practice, but you need to effectively, consistently, and deliberately practice in order for it to make any difference. So here's a routine for you to try that will help you learn faster. First, pick an overall topic. This might be the human body, background drawing, effects like explosions and fire, etc. This is your big picture that you're working towards in this set of practice sessions. You can have more than one overall goal, but keep in mind that your progress in other goals will be slower the more you try to do at once. I recommend sticking to one goal. The cool thing is, many of the things you learn in your first big topic, like some line work techniques that you might pick up, will be very effective in your next big topic, making it easier to learn as you improve. You are compounding these skills. Now what you're going to do is take that big topic and choose a subject that you want to focus on. This is where it'll be a little easier to multitask than if you choose multiple big topics. If I'm learning the human body, for example, my first steps would be to learn gesture and then to learn proportions of the body. So what I might do is a bit of both because they complement each other. As I learn gesture, I draw figures more quickly. As I learn proportions, I draw figures more proportionately correct. They make the other topic easier over time, which is why it's okay to do them at the same time. In fact, you can do them at literally the same time in your practice sessions. Next, we warm up. A quick warm-up is the fastest way to avoid art block. If you sit down to practice, even with a goal, making that first stroke is hard because it feels like you'll mess up. So, start with some rudiments. If you're a musician, you know rudiments help you master basic patterns so you can play them without thinking. The same process applies to drawing. Now, I have a drawing rudiments template on my Patreon that you can print out or load onto your drawing software for practice. It just covers some very common pencil strokes, which I find helpful in a warm-up. If you're not already a member of my Patreon, please go check it out if you can. It really helps the channel out, and it's a way for me to put out extra content for you guys. Now, if you have these rudiments, or if you want to do your own rudiments, spend about 5 minutes doing a bit of each exercise that you choose. You don't have to fill the page every single session, you can do it in parts. If rudiments feel boring as a warm-up, just try drawing whatever you've been working on, but from memory. Don't look at your notes, just draw. You might mess it up, but that's okay. You're training your brain to be okay with making mistakes and also becoming more comfortable with drawing from imagination. All right, on to studying. If I'm new to a subject, my first thought is to find a tutorial on it. Tutorials from good artists will break down the important steps you need to draw what you want to draw, giving you directions so you don't have to figure out everything by yourself. The goal is to understand the fundamental components of the subject. In gesture, for example, I need to know about the curve types, how asymmetry works, dynamics, while developing a general understanding of the body as a whole. A tutorial will tell me all of that and hopefully also tell me how to implement each fundamental part to create the whole. Now, me personally, I like to take notes directly in my sketchbook. If the tutorial has a drawing in it, I recreate that drawing as a bit of practice and then write notes beside that drawing regarding whatever important points the teacher makes. This way, I can go back and review my notes without rewatching the whole tutorial every time I need to see something. If you don't want writing in your sketchbook, which understandable, you want it to be artsy, just use little sticky notes and place them by the drawing that you're referencing. Once your notes are written, it's time to practice. The time you're practicing drawing in each session should be about 2/3 of the total time you've given yourself. When practicing, start by making a few smaller drawings using your notes, references, whatever. Then move on to drawing from imagination, creating a few drawings with zero reference. Look at those imagination drawings and point out all the errors you made using your sticky notes, your notes, whatever. Now, try to recreate those drawings from scratch, this time fixing the errors. To fix the errors, you can use reference, notes, tutorials, anything that helps you figure out what you did wrong and how to correct it. And when you do figure out what you did wrong and correct it, make sure to take note of that so you know for next time what to do. Literally write down what you fixed. You can basically repeat this process of drawing something and then fixing it until you feel you have a deep understanding of the topic. And this comes with time. This is not an instant process. I like to make my correction drawings from scratch, like I said earlier, just so I get a little more drawing time in. However, there is nothing wrong with editing your original drawing to try to make it better. In fact, I also do this a lot. It is a little more motivating to do it this way as well, because you literally see the difference as you do it. You erase one part, you fix it up, it looks good, and you feel good about that change. Making drawings like this where you fix up the errors also gives you more references that you can look back to from the future and see what you changed in case you're making that error again. Let's talk a little bit about our time management. Practice sessions need to have a time limit. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is dumping all of your practice time into a couple hours, one time a week. Smaller sessions a few times a week or every day is ideal because you don't need to spend as much time catching yourself up on wherever you left off. And you retain more information when you're consistently working on a task. Remember how I talked about procrastinating your tests and how the same logic applies to drawing? Well, there's good reason as to why you'd want to study over time instead of all at once. I'll give you two, actually. It is less tiring on the brain, meaning you oftentimes get more done with this method, and you will know more when you need to recall specific information from your practice. And another one, like I said before, you will retain the information for much, much longer. I cannot stress this enough, which means that you actually learn something that can last you a lifetime if you really practice it. If you cram all of that drawing into one day, you're gonna flood your memory too fast, and eventually it has to flush itself. And within a few days, you won't remember what you learned. At least you'll only remember the very basics or the key concepts, but you won't remember some specific details that will help you in the long run. So yes, you can learn by practicing once a week, but it's really inefficient and ineffective. So knowing this, knowing that you have to practice consistently a few times a week, how long should you actually practice each day? My recommendation would range from a few minutes to a few hours, depending on what you need. And this again goes a few times a week or every day, depending on your goals. Let's talk about casual learning. If you're just casually learning to draw, it's just a hobby. You only need to practice a few times a week. If you're busy and you don't really have a lot of time for drawing, you can practice as little as, say, 10 minutes a day. And you'll still learn quite a bit over time, but it is going to be over time. If you can, I would recommend a whole hour, if possible. This is more of the upper end for the casual learner. So you can really get a lot done by watching a full video and then actually practicing the same day. The same way you would practice after going to a class. You want to be able to regurgitate that information right after because it is the best window for you to learn and retain information in. Now, let's talk dedicated. If you really want to be an artist and possibly make a career out of your art, then you should aim for a bit more practice. This is especially true if you want to reach a very high skill level like that of Murata or Inoue. You know these authors, you've seen their work. It takes so much to get there. And I'm sure that you've heard of the 10,000 hours rule to mastering a skill like drawing. That's a very loose number. That is really pointing out people who are the best of the best. And that does apply to those authors I mentioned before. If you want to be world-renowned like them, you do need to practice almost that much or even more. And you need to practice multiple hours a day, every day, for multiple years to get there. Now you can see how intense that would be, so I don't recommend this to everyone. For most of us, it's just not possible without quitting your job or dropping out of school, things that you shouldn't have to do to learn how to draw. So my best recommendation is to work your way up to a few hours a day. Keep in mind, I said work your way up. We are not starting at a few hours a day. For most of you guys, I would recommend about 1 hour a day just to get started, which doesn't have to be all at once. Maybe 2 spurts of 30 minutes, 4 sets of 15 minutes, whatever best fits your schedule. Small sessions can allow you to get a lot done when you do multiple a day. As you progress, and perhaps if more time opens up to you, add more time to your practice. If you think you're not progressing as fast as you'd like after a few weeks or months on the initial schedule, then up the time. Maybe 2 hours, 3 hours per day, perhaps 4 or even 5 if you can really squeeze that in. If you're doing multiple hour sessions in a row, I recommend the Pomodoro technique so that you don't get burnt out and bored. That's just where you set 50 minutes on a timer, you do work during that 50 minutes, and then you take a 10-minute break, and then you do another 50 minutes of work, and then take a 10-minute break. I find it really effective for getting things done without getting super stressed and anxious about things and not getting burnt out. So as just a final note on building up your consistency, keep in mind, like a million times now I've said, you have to practice consistently or the practice process will take longer. I know I've made it clear that to be a pro, you have to practice a lot. So set reasonable goals for yourself. I would love to have the willpower to draw 12 hours a day, every day, and be a master by next year. But that's impossible without some early burnout. Instead, start with maybe 1 hour, then up it to 1.5 hours, then 2, then 3, then 4, etc. Start with easy subjects like drawing cubes in perspective. Then after a while, once you're comfortable, you do 2-point, then maybe 3-point perspective with those cubes. Add some fisheye perspective. You build up on a specific topic, and then you branch out to the next topic. And all the while, you are building up your practice time lengths. Take the time to learn what you can do without hating the process. If drawing is your passion, don't make it so hard on yourself that you start to hate it. Now, I want to take a moment to talk about common pitfalls that people fall into when they're learning how to practice or they're just practicing drawing. First thing, nobody is perfect and neither are their drawings. Every artist will tell you that they can see something to be improved in one of their drawings. Let me make it clear to you now that there is such a thing as overdoing it. You can do too much to a drawing and ruin its appeal, just as much as you can do too little and leave it lacking substance. The goal should be to reach a point where you look at the piece and go, wow, I'm proud of what I made. And that may take a few tries, and it may take a lot of failed sketches. Trust me, I have so many sketchbooks to prove it. But if you put your mind to it, you're bound to get somewhere with that. If you're a perfectionist, take the time once in a while to compare your old drawings to your new ones. I guarantee you'll find that despite all of the errors you still see in your new stuff, the old stuff will be much, much worse. I'm just gonna put on screen now 2 drawings that I did maybe a few months apart this year, and you can really see the difference that comes. Even though I may have tried to correct the initial one and the new one, there's clear things that I've learned over time that can only be shown through that time. That change in time is what really gives the new perspective that we gain. And this growth is hard to see sometimes, but it's there, and there's nothing perfect you can find about it. Another common pitfall that people often find themselves in is practicing too much at once. Practicing too much at once will jumble your brain if you haven't properly built up to that many hours at a time. You cannot learn 20 different body parts all at once without cutting the necessary corners that separate those who can kind of draw to those who really understand what they are creating. So, set a task for yourself and stick to it. Again, another pitfall, one of the hardest things to do is learn the fundamentals. I know you want to draw like this, and so do I, but a mistake I and a lot of other people made is expecting to get there just by copying what the pros do. The pros know the fundamentals, and without them, they'd be terrible at what they do. If I want to draw characters like this, and I decided to skip basic prisms and how they look from different angles, there is a very good chance that my character is going to look wonky. It's the same reason a doctor doesn't magically know how to draw the body from scratch. They might know all of the names and where they go and what part is which, but it won't look as good as what an artist can draw, because a good artist has fundamentals in art that the doctor could not copy overnight. Just like that artist can't perform heart surgery just because they know where the heart is. Foundations are what prop up your other skills. Without a proper foundation, any building would crumble when faced with a real challenge. And that is the same for your art skills. And the final common pitfall. Feedback is critical to understanding where you land in terms of ability. This can come in the form of self-critique by comparing with other pieces, or perhaps having a friend look at your art and telling you if it's good, or having another artist look at your art and telling you if it's good. But ideally, you should seek out someone who understands the field, but isn't looking to just insult your work. And it is all too common that this can happen. There is a reason. It's called constructive criticism. If you post an artwork on Twitter and someone tells you it looks terrible without any substance to what they say should be changed or altered, or what looks bad and what looks good, and how can you really improve? They're just trying to insult you. They are not the person you should be looking to for advice. Seek out artists, art communities, teachers, etc. People who can look at your work and help you to improve, not just hurt how you feel. It can be hard to do that, but when you do, when you find those people who will help you improve, it will make a world of difference. At the same time, you also have to choose to look at your work
and objectively think, what can I change? Not just saying, I hate this, I don't like the way this looks, because personally, I've done that a lot, and it's just self-detriment. You're not gonna get anything done. You're just gonna hate drawing more. So self-critique in a constructive way, the same way as you would want someone else to look at your art. Practice is something that we don't often think of as a learned skill. It's literally the learning of skills. It can't be that hard. But as you've seen here today, there is a correct way to learn and a correct way to practice. Learning to draw is a deliberate process, and you must work on it consistently so that you can put together all the small pieces that build it up. You have to learn subjects thoroughly by their fundamentals and practice them enough that you can recall them in a long-run setting, not right away. Most importantly, you have to set realistic goals with your time and energy so that you can continue to feel that passion to draw without feeling overwhelmed by how much effort it truly takes to learn. Remember that there is no such thing as perfection. But despite that, you must aim to continuously improve and seek others that can help guide you along that journey. Put in the effort to learn and grow, and you will see results you never thought attainable before. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to like and comment to show some support, and also make sure to subscribe so that you can stay up to date with all the latest Start Manga content. This has been Spencer from Start Manga, and I'll see you later.